Welcome to this video of stripping and repairing this Volvo Penta tilt mechanism from a 270-280 Volvo Penta outdrive, the AQ version. As you can see, that's the breakdown and the parts identified. I've already taken off this top box here with the switch and the relay. Disconnect the cables appropriately from the motor as well, and then extract the motor. I've brought the motor back to the workshop as well, so we can go take a look at that. But as you can see, this is the breakdown as you go through various bits and pieces, and then this is a unit itself. So I've already stripped this unit once, so I'm gonna do it again to show you how it all goes back together and is pulled apart. So here we go. So first things first is removing it from the boat. Now to remove it from the boat, there are some of these have a collar, some don't, but there's two bolts effectively that sit and hold this to your outdrive. Once you remove those two bolts, mine didn't have a gasket, which should actually be fitted under here. As you can see, actually it's in a pretty poor state. I've filled a couple of holes up, a bit of chemical metal just to prevent that going through, and it was a bit tough coming out, so this slide was all gunked up. These O-rings were all blocked up, so you need to get a screwdriver in there and give it a bit of a lever to separate from the outdrives. So if you feel that it's not coming out, the only thing that does hold it are those two bolts. So get the screwdriver in, give it a wedge, and eventually it will pop up. Once it's out, what I found is in order to split the two sections, so this is the top section here and this is the bottom section, I actually clamped this part in a vise on an angle like that. It actually shows you to do that in the manual as well, so a little bit like that, so you get an idea. It's the best way I found to hold it and get the manual split first. Now it does make a note here to make a note of the distances between the surfaces. I didn't do that purely because actually the leg would come halfway up and then just wouldn't come anymore. So I wanted to strip the whole thing down and have a look at everything and make sure everything was working, put it back together, some fresh grease, turn the gears and make sure everything was sorted. So I'll set that when it actually goes back on the boat, and you set the tension by just tightening this top piece here down onto this body, and the more you tighten it, effectively the more tension that you get brings the outdrive leg up. When I had all this in bits, first of all, is I actually put all the individual bits into some degreaser. Degreaser I bought from Screwfix, the heavy duty stuff. Just left it in for a week in a bath of degreaser. I actually took all the paint off, which was really good as well, so it means I can repaint it as well, but it means all the grease was off. I can inspect all the parts and then put it all back together. Okay, so one of the first things to do is just remove this collar over here. So that's just a support collar, and this part here. Now there's a tab washer, so there's two holes on these. I haven't put any Loctite on this yet, so I'll do that when I finally do the reassemble. But that's the washer, and as you can see, there's two holes that the tab washer sits in there, and as you can see, there's a square on there that holds it again, just stops it from coming off. So there you go. Next part is to unscrew this cap here. What you notice on when you probably first take them out is a little bit stiff. So once you got a pair of Stilsons and get them, you can actually get that done. Now there's a couple of O-rings that stop the water coming in here, so you undo this cap, this end cap. Mine was a bit full of things, so crud when I put it out. Now there's an actual O-ring in there that is quite critical, and a O-ring on the outside. So you can both those O-rings from Volvo Penta. I actually bought an O-ring kit from Toolstation that had all the same size O-rings in, so it's a much more cost-effective way of doing it. So that comes off. Place that to the side. Okay, so the next stage is to separate the two top covers. So come out. So as you see, so there's just a top cover section, and then you have a spring. And actually on the bottom spring, which is worth noting, you have a bearing carrier washing. So the way the bearings are structured is they have these small grooves in actually on these bearing parts themselves. As you can see, you've got the worm and the shaft in there, and just in this part there, hopefully the camera can pick it up, but just in there you can actually see the drive itself. Just turn this, see. So the bearing comes out. Make sure you make note of what way the bearing goes up. So for mine it's that way up with the bearing carrier on top, and then you can screw the casing off. Now once you screw that up, you can actually pull the shaft out. Now for some reason mine didn't actually like to be pulled out when I took it apart, and I think that was half the problem of why it wasn't actually coming apart, or the leg was coming up, first of all, because this shaft was just absolutely seized right down this hole here. So I've actually got it to a point now where it's all being cleaned up with fresh grease, fresh oil, and there's a small worm key here, which you just got a woodruff key, which you just got to be aware of, and it actually sits in a groove actually in the casing as well. So you unscrew the carrier plate there all the way off. So that comes all the way off that. I won't do it this time, but that comes off that. And then on this bottom part here, you have another gear which comes out. Just remember which way that physically comes out. So that's the gear, and then you have a bearing which pops out there, and again a bearing carrier race that goes there. So clean everything up, especially paying close attention into the sliding shaft there, because that's where mine had seized up after years of sat in up and down in seawater or not being used. And grease everything back up. As you can probably see a bit better now, the worm gear there. So check that. You want to take it out. There's two circlips just inside there which you can pull out. You can then actually extract the worm gear from inside that as well. So simple case of rebuilding is, once everything's stripped and you've cleaned everything, is you pop your first bearing washer back in, your bearing carrier back on, and take your gears and just slide them and pop those back onto the bearing carrier face. What I found makes it a bit easier is just putting your finger in and turning the worm as you do it. There we go. So that's down. So you apply a nice piece of grease all around here, and then we got effectively the shaft that we need to make sure goes back in, and again paying particular attention to ensure lining up the key. So when you know it's lined up, you get a nice smooth sliding action, which is pretty good. You then screw on your clutch plate here all the way down. Now what I've done with my one is just set it all the way down to the bottom. So we had the shaft just sticking out there. There we go. Just turn that to get that in, so that's all in place now. So you can see the gears in, the clutch plates in. We got the shaft which slides nice up and down, nice and easy. So that's all pressed home. And then the bearing. So that's the way that goes up, and then the bearing race that sits on top of that. So that's done, and then the spring that sits on top of that, finally followed by the top casing. Now this is where you can set the tension, it says in the manual, so you can draw this down. So I'll just give it a bit of a wipe. So, and then you get it all the way down, and then effectively that can set the tension on how much you've got going through. So when you turn this, obviously the shaft will go obviously in and out of the holder here. So I always just give it a bit of a test to make sure that it's working. So it's very slow because obviously the motor spins very fast, so it's the wrong way. So just spin it back this way, just to bring up that shaft. As you can see, is coming back up now. You can just notice by these grooves here. I've just wiped off. So once you've got that all the way back up and it's where you want, it's pretty simple just to slide this unit back over. It's got a washer in there. I always just put a small piece of grease around that just to let them slide. Usually a bit of Vaseline. Slide the top unit back on. Again, just using some tighten up. I'll do that later. And then the tab washer, just to prevent that from going. Bit of Loctite on the thread, and you can then screw that back up, secure that, place the final nylon carrier back on, and then refit the motor, put it back in the boat, and hopefully that'll be good for another 20 years of outdrive tilting.